Hey, what's going on? Shep here at Iron Anchor Cycles, and want to talk a little bit today about fairings for Dynas. So one of the big popular questions, almost to the point of being a joke, that's out there on the internet is, hey bro, what fairing is that? And so today I wanted to take the opportunity to, one, answer that question. We've got an Arlen Ness fairing here on this '05 Super Glide, but also talk a little bit about how we mounted it and what we did to make it work. One of the big challenges I think that's out there for people with certain bikes is that there are fairings that are semi-universal and may work on bikes and you see them on other people's, but they really don't come with what you need to get it done. So one of those bikes is these 39mm Dynas with a top mount headlight. And the big questions a lot of times are, what do I do about my headlight and how do I get that fairing on? So we're gonna dive in here a little bit, show you how we put this on and see what it looks like underneath, and we'll talk about the brackets and hardware that we use to do it. And hopefully this will be helpful for somebody who's trying to figure out how to get a fairing on their Dyna. So stay tuned, stick around, and we'll dive into it. So there are a lot of bikes where it's real easy to get a fairing to go on. The manufacturers make fairings for that bike, it bolts on, everything is plug and play, and it's pretty seamless and easy to do. And in some cases, and we'll talk about some of those other options you have for fairings, are 49mm front end Dynas. There are quite a few options out there and lots of really different good fairings that really will just go right on with no modification. However, on the other side of that coin, one of the bikes that I think people have the most trouble with is 39mm Dynas with top mount headlights. And so I figured we'd do a little bit of discussion on how we're gonna put a fairing on this bike and exactly what parts we're using and where we're getting them from. So hopefully maybe we can help some folks out with that. So what we've got here is the first step in getting the fairing we're using onto this particular bike. And this is a bracket that we got from Street Syndicate. And this bracket is big and beefy and really is gonna allow you to mount a fairing and get the headlight in the correct position, and it does it all together. There's a lot of confusion both in the instructions from a lot of the fairings, which in a lot of cases aren't that great, about headlight blocks and extensions and the things you need to do. What these guys have done is really great, which is take the fairing and create the perfect bracket for it. I'll point out some of the things I like, some of the things that maybe are a little challenging, and then we'll take a look at how it all goes together. So let me zoom in a little bit, give you a better look at this fairing, we'll zoom in a little bit, get a better look at this bracket, and we'll go from there. Hopefully this is a pretty good angle to be able to see what we've got going on here. And basically what I wanted to illustrate was that this bracket is, one, both really beefy, using pretty thick gauge steel here. This looks like, I don't know, in some pieces an 1/8 of an inch, in some pieces this is actually 1/4 inch steel on the back here. So what you've got is your first part of the bracket, which is an L-shaped, which makes up the part that bolts in under your riser bolts, comes up, and then has a channel that this front piece can slide up and down in. And what that's gonna do is give you the ability to adjust the height from its lowest position, really about maybe 3 inches all the way up to its top position. And when that moves, that's gonna take your headlight and the mount for the fairing up and down, giving you the opportunity to go low with it and go real high and set it wherever you'd like. Then beyond that, you've got these wings that are gonna bolt onto the sides of the fairing, and the top of the fairing is gonna attach here. So what you can see here is that, between your adjustment here in terms of up and down, here in terms of these brackets moving up and down, and then also in the ability to kind of turn this a little bit, this bracket is adjustable in every conceivable way. And even beyond that, I forgot one, which is you've got channels here where your headlight bucket can slide forward and backward. So you take the good with the bad here. The good is that you're gonna be able to position the fairing and the headlight anywhere you want, exactly where you want. The challenge with this is that because it's infinitely adjustable, you don't really have a reference point to start moving, to start basing everything off of. You really need to put the fairing on, see how it looks, take it off, make an adjustment, put it back on, see how it looks, make an adjustment, and you've got an infinite amount of possibilities and positions that this can sit in. So, in addition to pivoting here, it's gonna pivot here, it can slide up and down here, the headlight can move here. So it really does take a little bit of time to get this dialed in exactly how you want it. So that's not a flaw. Obviously, infinite adjustability is a good thing. It's just it's going to take a little while to get you there. The only trouble that I found with this particular bracket was right here in attaching these outer ears, if you'll call them that, onto the main bracket. We replaced the hardware that came with this. It's nice that the bracket comes with all stainless steel hardware, but what it came with was all 5/16 hardware. And what we found here was that those bolts were just not big enough to hold this bracket to this bracket with the amount of strength that we needed. So if you can see here on the outside, this channel is quite large. And on the other side, you can see that the channel on the bracket coming up is large as well. So understanding that you really only have 2 points of attachment for your fairing onto the bracket, here and here, and then again on from the outer brackets to the inner bracket here and here, you really need to tighten those down pretty tight to keep that fairing from moving around. And when we tried to do that with the 5/16 hardware, it just wound up wanting to crunch this stuff and start pulling the washers through these big channels. So the easy solution to that was we just went ahead and put larger hardware in here, which solved the problem. So perhaps in the future, that's something that maybe these guys would consider, just including bigger hardware that fits the holes that come with it. So that's basically where we're at with this bracket. Let's take a look at the fairing and see how that goes together. All right, so here's our fairing. And as you may have guessed from some of the earlier photos and also looking at this bracket, we've got the very classic Arlen Ness fairing here that's gonna go on. What we did here was after we took the steps to take the fairing and use it for mock-up to get the bracket where we needed it to be, we went ahead and just did a gloss black paint on this fairing to get it to match the paint on this Dyna. These fairings are not difficult to paint, and what I will say is although they come black, it's really just a raw black plastic, so no matter what, you're really gonna have to put a coat of paint on here to have it look good. But so in any event, what you can see from this is the way these come is with no mounts built into the fairing. And with the original hardware that comes with these fairings, essentially what they're wanting you to do is take these little brackets that are meant to clamp onto the triple tree and drill into your fairing and find a place to mount those brackets. They really don't work well, and it doesn't put the fairing in a place where you'd want it to be on a Dyna. And there's no allowance for what to do with your headlight. There's a headlight block that they sell that's supposed to work with it. It doesn't work for top mount 39mm headlights. So this system is really what I've found to be the best thing in terms of a plug and play, bolt on, easy to do bracket for this particular fairing. So what's gonna happen in this case is your outer, you've got these plastic fasteners that hold the windshield onto the fairing. You're gonna not put in those last two at the very edges, and you're gonna replace that with stainless fasteners that are gonna go from the bracket onto here. Now, you really do only have 2 points of attachment for the fairing itself. However, the way that the fairing sits around the headlight, it does support it from the bottom as it sits in between the headlight bracket and the headlight itself. So if you get this stuff all tightened down pretty well, it is pretty solid. So we'll take a look at that. Just to kind of show you how this is gonna wind up looking. So this is gonna slide on here, and roughly that's about where we're gonna be. Now, as I mentioned, you've got an infinite amount of adjustability in this, so if we decided we wanted this to go further up, further down, any of that is a possibility. We just have to make those changes, but I'm pretty happy with how this is for now. So what we're gonna do is just go ahead and get this mounted up and see what it looks like. So we'll do that now. All right, so here's our fairing mounted up onto the bike, and you know, given the time that we took to make those adjustments with the bracket and really dial it in, we were able to get this nice and centered exactly in the position where we wanted it to be. So you can see you've got your headlight centered nicely inside the fairing, and the fairing mounted up using the two outside mounting holes on the corners of the fairing where the windshield and fairing come together. So, like I said, only 2 points of attachment here, so you still do get a little bit of movement in this, and you know, we'll see how that goes, and we might try and find a way to beef this up a little bit at the bottom and to give it another 2 points of attachment somewhere. But for the time being, you know, it looks good and it's mounted up there, and we've got our headlight in the right place, and that right there is probably half the battle. So We'll take this down, we'll get a couple more shots of it so you can kind of see it from a few more angles, but I figured we'd just take this opportunity to do a quick video to answer that question. Hey bro, what fairing is that? So we'll take a few more looks at it and we'll go from there. All right, so here it is from one more angle from the other side. You can see that it does fit pretty well and tight. Like I said, my only concern here obviously is you do have a little bit of this wiggle that, you know, when the wind blows, we'll see how it does. But like I said, it's on, it looks good, and we just got to get out on the road and test it a little bit.